hang on. Now, is it going? Hello?
Yeah, that sounds better.
That's better, okay. Turn the mic on. Yes, unaccustomed as I am to public speaking. So woven through the first 3 chapters is the 7 limb prayer, which is also in Sanskrit called Anuttara Puja, so the peerless puja. So this, and the 7 limb prayer is, what's the first limb? Prostration, then? Offering, yeah. Then confession, yeah. Then rejoicing, then yeah. Requesting, and may you stay with us, yeah. And dedication. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So, and the story is that Maitreya, who is now in Tushita heaven, has the stupa on his head because he followed his guru's advice. And the guru's advice was, the guru was Shakyamuni, and so he, in theory, he became enlightened before Shakyamuni became enlightened because he did this 7 limb puja, the 7 limb prayer. So if you look, when you're going through the weekend, you'll see that we're kind of in the stage of prostration in the sense of to pay homage to, you know. In Tibetan, chartselo is very much a physical thing, you know, to prostrate. In the Sanskrit, namaskara is to pay respect, to pay homage to you know, literally, I give you a name. If you don't have a name, then it's something else. But so this is very much about developing that mind of respect to the Buddhas and admiration to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and so it's all part of that. And then as we get into the second chapter, you'll see that we get into generosity and the visualizations around that. So, would somebody please volunteer to read verse 23 through to verse 30, using the microphone, because that's what everybody needs, is a microphone in their life. Okay, so who hasn't done it? You've volunteered again, but anyone else? Anyone else? Big space. Okay, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Do you know that? Do you remember that? What that came from? Yes.
Well, I'm trying to remember where it came from, but I can remember pigs in space.
Do you remember the Muppets? And the Muppets, and then occasionally somebody would say something, and they'd all look around. Up to 30, please. Including 30, please. Thank you.
Right, this is 1.23.
23 to 30,
Yeah.
please.
Who has such an altruistic intention as this? Do even fathers and mothers have it? Do the gods and sages? Does even Brahma have it? If those beings have not even dreamt before of such an attitude for their own welfare in their dreams, how can they generate it for the welfare of others? Such a mind of welfare of sentient beings does not arise even for their own sake. An outstanding jewel of the mind, an unprecedented wonder is born. How can I fathom the merits of this dual mind, the cause of joy of all migrating beings, and the panacea for the suffering of sentient beings? If merely a benevolent intention excels venerating the Buddhas, then what need to mention striving to make all beings without exception happy? Although wishing to be rid of misery, they run towards misery itself. Although wishing to have happiness, like an enemy, they ignorantly destroy it. For those who are deprived of happiness and burdened with many sorrows, It satisfies them all with joys, dispels all suffering, and clears away confusion. Where is there a comparable virtue? Where is there even such a friend? Where is there merit similar to this?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So, in your discussions, you kind of looked at that a little bit. There's a difference between altruism and bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is bigger by far. Altruism is often about this life. It's not about next life. It's often about a target group, a small group of people. It's not about everybody. It's not to say that altruism is bad. The world runs on altruism, but bodhicitta is not just altruism. It's broader, it's bigger, it's larger. And that mind that takes all sentient beings as the kind of object of why we're doing something, to remove their suffering. That's why this is called a jewel or rare or precious or any of these terms, is because to develop this attitude towards all beings is really, really difficult, but so worthwhile. It really broadens the mind in a most extraordinary way. You know, if you think of just preliminaries to bodhicitta, let alone bodhicitta. So, for instance, with meditations on love, and you've all done those in your time, and some of you have led the meditations on loving kindness that we do here in the spring term. But, you know, you start with that, may I be happy? You know, do you have to have that sense of, may I be happy? And also that sense of I'm worthy of being happy, because often, for some reason in our culture, we have some built-in self-hatred going on that then, you know, may everyone else be happy, but I'm not worthy, you know, which is, it doesn't work, it doesn't make it happen. So, and then you broaden it out, don't you, to may my friends, those people who please me, in inverted commas, who are kind of all right to get on with, may they be happy. And then strangers, and you can do that. And what tends to happen is you're trying to do the whole of that meditation process in a day or a weekend. So you're belting through these things. But each one takes time, doesn't it? You know, each one requires thinking about it and getting used to it. And then, of course, at the very end, it's may my enemies be happy. May those who irritate me, but those who piss me off, may they be happy. And that's hard. The idea that that's easy is unreal, you know. And if we don't do it, you know, bang, bang, bang over one day, but we take time, if you're doing particularly that meditation on the enemy, but also even on the unknown, the neutral person, the person you meet in the supermarket or something like that, the mind will start to kick against that. That's kind of why. Why should I do that? And particularly with the enemy, it's like, really, we'll kick back. And that's interesting when your mind kicks back, because then you can see. And then you can look at your rationale, your reasoning that you have for not wanting that person to be happy or that person to be happy, or, you know, that kind of, and the anger that underlies the way we relate with some beings. All this. Anytime I hear of or think about the anger thing, I always remember Venerable Rabina, who had a marvelous way of describing her life before she met Buddhism. Of, you know, she got angry with this group and then that group and then this group and then that group, and eventually ended up being angry with everyone and could only end up hating herself after that. It was just that kind of, and then she took over control and changed it around. But in order to wish for someone who's causing us problems to be happy, first we need to do that on the seat, don't we? We need to do that on the thing here. We need to kind of run scenarios. And it doesn't have to be someone who's consciously trying to hurt us or consciously trying to be our enemy or do us down. But some people just are irritating. You know what I mean? Just from my side, somebody is irritating or they're needy and so my response is to kind of push away subtly, to want to be distant. And that's the thing I have to deal with in the meditation. So when you bring that person to mind and then watch that kind of then the question is why? Why so strong a sense of pushing away? And looking at, so yes, they're needy, they exhaust me. Why do they exhaust me? What's going on in my mind that's making that happen? That, and then you often get an insight into your own. They say in Buddhism that the external obstacles are aided and abetted by our internal obstacles. It's like we have a great fortress, and it has these magnificent gates that can be shut and make the fortress really strong, but we've got people inside the fortress flinging the gates open and going, come on in, party away, It's really useful to see how the mind kicks against some of these Mahayana meditations. So it's worth in these things, although we're kind of going through them rather rapidly, just taking, for instance, verse 28 and thinking about that. Although wishing to be free of misery, they run towards misery itself. Actually, we could say, though wishing to be free of misery, we run to misery itself. Although wishing to have happiness, like an enemy, they ignorantly destroy it. Although wishing to have happiness, like an enemy, we ignorantly destroy it. But sometimes we can catch ourselves doing that, can't we? Everything is kind of going okay, and then for some reason, we throw everything out the pram. Things are kind of going smoothly, our practice is going well, we're kind of developing a bit of stability or something, and then for some unknown reason, some ripening of a previous karma, we'd say, we start comparing ourselves to X or Y, and they're a better practitioner, they're wealthier, more beautiful, smell less, all these things, and then we go, and then a whole load of I story starts up again. Whereas before we were quite all right without the kind of I, And similarly, this wishing to be free, rid of misery, we run towards misery itself. Sometimes we're kind of, in English we have this phrase, better the devil you know than the devil you don't, which is that thing of, rather than step outside and go into a slightly unknown situation, you stay in the safe zone of being miserable because you know what it feels like. You know what I mean? Rather than, and it's quite common, it's even in just ordinary things we do, like I have an absolute fear and loathing of dentists. I find the whole dental thing untrue, just somebody having their hands in my mouth and the machinery and stuff like that. I just freak out all the time. So I'm consciously lying on the chair going, relax, relax, and that whole thing. And then you have relax. Does my breath smell? Did I eat garlic? Just, are they turning around and going, But that whole thing, so when it comes about 5 or 6 years ago, the dentist who I'd finally found after not going to the dentist for a long time, finally found who was gentle, very soft, very gentle, stopped being a dentist, retired, and it was like panic. What am I going to do now? Because how do you go to a dentist and say, are you gentle? Because they're not going to go, no, mate, I always come in with a hammer and chisel. They're all going to say yes. So there's that moment, the initial kind of like first date with your dentist. You've got your mouth wide open. They've got their hands in your mouth, and there's this thing at the side, and you're thinking, what's it going to be like? Is it? And then you end up with me fixating on the hygienist rather than the dentist, because the hygienist is less of a trauma for me than the dentist, But that better the devil you know than the devil you don't. We don't want to move on. We often don't, even though the situation is difficult, we often don't want to move on. Sometimes you see it here when somebody comes and they're in an abusive relationship and they tell you all these things, and you're just thinking, whoa, how do I deal with that? How do I help you with that? And then the natural response from my side, I'm afraid, is just to say, girl, get up and walk, go. Just leave them behind. But then you realize underneath that, the staying in the abusive relationship is a lack of self-worth and a lack of confidence and all the rest. So you can't just say, get up and go. Because even if they do get up and go, if they haven't got self-confidence and self-worth, they'll probably end up with someone else who does that kind of game. Because we repeat our mistakes, don't we? Endlessly. Well, I do, in any case. So it's this one verse, when we think about our own lives and we think about the lives of the people we know, has an awful lot of truth to it, doesn't it? Really, we say, I say, I want to be free of being unenlightened, I say that. What do I do? It's different, isn't it? Sometimes I do things that people say will take me out of being unenlightened. Other times I go out and get plastered with friends, you know what I mean? That's not going to enlighten me. Many things, but a night out in the pub and a hangover the next day is not enlightening, that's for sure. But so frequently. And similarly, that kind of, we say we want to be happiness. I'm not keen on this word happiness, because there's a kind of chasing after happiness. There's a kind of happiness trap, isn't there? Are you happy? Well, what does that mean? Are you content? Maybe just, are things kind of going okay? Are you comfortable? These content, comfortable. But sometimes we're habituated to making ourselves uncomfortable when we don't need to. We don't need to do that, but we kind of just do it again. We do it again. Difficult to break that pattern. This is quite a powerful verse if we think about it. Okay, so unusually, I'd like you to do the meditation for the third session now. And then we'll look at the rest of that chapter. So again, I'll read out the two verses, which are verse 26 and verse 27, and then just ask you to think about that and see what your emotional response to it is. If it's boredom, I'm really sorry, but hey, you've only got half an hour left, so it's okay. But the point of these verses is to develop a sense of admiration, of wanting to achieve that, of being immensely interested in that, seeing the benefits of it, the value of it, the joy of this mind of bodhicitta. So these two verses, what do they bring up in your own mind? There's no right answer, in my view, because each one of us is individual, but the general thing is to develop this wish to develop bodhicitta, like the bodhisattvas and Buddhas, because they do amazing things, because their minds are so clean, clear, crystal, because they're so kind, so loving, so gentle, so wise, all these attributes, all these things come out of bodhicitta. They come out of that mind focused on becoming fully enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings. So just these two verses, and then we'll spend some time thinking on them, meditating on them. How can I fathom the merits of this dual mind, the cause of joy of all migrating beings, and the panacea for the suffering of sentient beings? If merely a benevolent intention excels venerating the Buddhas, then what need to mention striving to make all beings without exception happy? Thank you. And maybe just to bring to your attention the first two lines of verse 27. If merely a benevolent intention excels venerating the Buddhas. That's an interesting thing in a Buddhist text, isn't it? Because we're always taught, pay homage to, respect the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and all the rest. But greater than that is a benevolent intention. And greater than that is Bodhicitta. So, the last set of verses. Who would like to, or who will, read verses 31 to 36? Any offers? Thank you. Yeah, thank you. You have to hold it quite close to your mouth, I think. So verse 31 to the end of that chapter, please.
If whoever reciprocates benefit is worthy of some praise, then what need to mention the Bodhisattva who does good without its being asked of him or her? The world honors as virtuous a man or a woman who procures mediocre food and for an instant gives it disrespectfully to a small number of beings that satisfies them for only half a day. What need be said then of one who constantly bestows the unsurpassed bliss of the Sugātas for a long time upon countless sentient beings, fulfilling all their hopes? The Buddha has said that someone who generates an evil thought against such a benefactor as a child of the victors will remain in hell for as many eons as there were evil thoughts. But if one acts out of an attitude of faith, its fruits will multiply far more than that. Even in adversity, the children of the victors generate no negativity. Instead, their virtues naturally increase. I prostrate the body of she in whom the sacred precious mind is born. I seek refuge in that source of happiness, who brings to happiness even those who harm them.
Thank you. So going back to the seven limb puja being threaded through these first three chapters, you can read verse 36 as the kind of final statement. I prostrate to all that has gone before, because it's all about talking about the mind of bodhicitta and those who have it. Yeah? So it's the first limb, the prostration. And then if you read back further from that, there are some interesting things that people tend to fixate on. So verse 34, the thing about being in hell for as many eons as the evil thoughts against the bodhisattva. And people tend to take that verse and kind of lock onto that. But if you look at 35, it's kind of taking the other side. We had this discussion about faith being a translation of the Tibetan word jepa, but it can also equally well be translated as conviction. So this is the positive side of that. So with all these things, we need to bear in mind both the positive and the negative. There's a tendency amongst Europeans, in any case, that when they take on vows and things like that, it's seen as a series of don'ts, and it's seen as a series of things that if you break it, you'll roast in hell for 1,000,000 eons. There is that tradition in Buddhism, but we forget, in terms of the Mahayana, that it's about developing a bright uplifting, positive, confident mind. And yes, if we break these things, we may well. But if we fixate on that side, then we'll never get anywhere. We need to develop a positive, uplifting mind. So take those as a pair rather than take them individually, because those two as a pair balance. And then this, the world honors, so 32, the world honors as virtuous a man or woman who procures mediocre food from an instant and gives it disrespectfully to a small number of beings, that satisfies them only for half a day. There is that tendency, isn't there, that people, if we give money to beggars or people begging in the street, we don't just give, do we? Sometimes there's a kind of expectation of something coming back, thank you for a start. But we don't give and we don't let go. Many, many years ago now, when I went to Sri Lanka, I remember the guy who was driving us around, we decided we'd stay in Kandy and come down on the train from Kandy down to Colombo. And so he went on ahead in the car. And I gave him rupees to stay somewhere for that night. And I heard myself sounding like a memsahib going, here you are, here's 300 rupees. Now don't spend it on toddy and arak. And it's one of those moments when you hear yourself and you think, God, that's awful. What am I doing? Just give it. Don't give it with this, And, I've done it to people in the street as well. I've gotten to that self-righteous mode, and they ask for money, and you go and buy them a sandwich, and they don't want that. They really don't want the sandwich, Or the guy who's walking down the train, wanting money for the hostel at night. They don't want that. They want money to get smashed or take the next drug thing. You can't just give them a sandwich, And one time, actually, someone really had to go at me and say, I don't want a fucking sandwich, And I was really upset, and I thought, actually, he's right, But because I wasn't giving, I was kind of gaining some kind of bartering deal going on, Here you are, young man, do have that, Just, whoa, completely. But we do. I don't know if any of you have seen it, and probably because I'm being live streamed, it'll be considered shocking, but there's a show on in London at the moment called The Book of Mormon. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but it really, it's written by the same man who did South Park. So the language is quite purple, but it really has a go at practically everybody. But there is a wonderful dig against the kind of Europeans saving the Africans thing that has gone with starvation and hunger and things like that. And you have this wonderful moment when all the black people on the stage move to the side of the stage, and these white people do a kind of number where they go, "We are Africa." It's just appalling and funny at the same time. But it's that kind of mind of, we've come in to save you, and just that, it's very, very rude, very, very rude. But, I thought I wasn't shockable, but I found myself kind of corpsing with laughter and hiding my face because I felt slightly ashamed at it at the same time. But it's that not just giving, if we give, let it go. And we admire many people who give money, but they give it with strings, It's something to catch in our own mind when we don't just let go and we give it with strings. Or these sometimes you get when people move towards the end of their life and the writing of the will, and the rewriting of the will, endless times as various people go in and out of favor. And solicitors make a lot of money from that. A lot of money. I heard of somebody whose mother, in the last 5 years of her life, rewrote the will 30 times. And then, of course, at the end of it, it's finding the will, and then it's not the will, it's all of them, and trying to work out what date order they go, and just who was in favor at the time and who was out of favor at the time. And luckily, the kids all kind of just said, we'll split it equally, because they could see that every single one of them had been cut out and put back in at times. But just giving. But that mind that gives with no expectation of anything coming back, that's something to train in, and that we can do in the street here. You know, the number of times I've given and they don't say anything, and I have to catch myself mentally going, well, a thank you would do, you know. Or somebody really expressed it well about 10 years ago. There was someone begging in the tube, and this Aussie guy was there with his friends, and he gave £1 or something like that, and then they just wandered on, and he said, hang on a minute, aren't you meant to do a little dance or song or something? But it was, that's what we do, you know. But think about, you know, the giving. So also, you know, we often wait to be asked. You know, we know we can help, but we're not going to get involved until we wait to be asked. You know, I find myself doing that, and the Bodhisattva doesn't. The Bodhisattva just does it, gets on with it, doesn't expect thanks, doesn't expect to be noted, doesn't expect anything like that. I mean, it's such a different mind to where I am, that's for sure. But that's a mind, isn't it? That's something to go for, where you can just work for somebody, help somebody, do something, and you're really, really not interested in thank you or money back or, you know, whatever.
I'm just interested, like, if Bodhisattva would come to someone who comes and asks for some money, Bodhisattva will see that thing is not going to help actually completely destroy the person. Bodhisattva help them? How give?
Bodhisattva may give something else, mightn't they? They might give something else. I mean, if you could really see the person's mind, and you know, I mean, particularly you work with homeless and people on the streets, and sometimes it's not the best thing to give money. And you get or cigarettes or drugs or whatever it is, but you get two responses to that. One side, I've heard Lamas say, just give it. Don't do the stuff. And the other is think carefully about it, and even if you don't give, acknowledge who they are. Don't just blank them and walk past, which is what a lot of us do. I see that countless times, particularly the elephant's great for that, isn't it? There's always people with their paws out waiting to, and the number of people who just do not see, they've got the headphones on and they, you know perfectly well they see. At least say, no thank you, you know. That's just polite. They're not non-people, you know.
This guy on the wall for once, we've been seeing him for
Hang on, you need the microphone. The microphone. Yeah, it's good, it's a story. Hey, if I have to do this, you have to do it. We're equally shy. It's suffering for both.
But because you mentioned that, if people sometimes being kind of disconnect. Well, the word. Let's use disconnected. It's just a word. I had this situation at Wolof Road when we drove by and we noticed this guy lying down next to the bench, right? I think not far from Morrison's, and next to him there was a guy sitting next to him on the bench with the headphones on, and he had his foot like literally almost on his face, and he was sitting there and just. And I just couldn't believe it. You know, I even called him, did you know this guy? And I said, no, I don't know. So I'm sorry. It was just...
No, it's true, yeah.
Strange situation.
It's like last night on the way back home, if anyone knows Brixton, you know where the police station is, and they've kind of made a little park in front of it, which has got no grass and rather ropey old tree. And there was someone sitting in the only fixed chair there, because they do that now, so you can't take it away and sell it. And they were just slumped over the arm of the chair. And nobody was paying a blind bit of attention. I mean, there's me on top of the bus going by going, oh, look at that, you know. But nobody walking by was paying a blind bit of attention. The police weren't coming out to have a look. And I just thought, you know, it's classic, isn't it? Kind of as you go by, sometimes if someone's out, you kind of check to see whether they're breathing or whether they're clearly just drunk and they've been out too much. But just to kind of have somebody there slumped in a chair over the arm, and then a whole bunch of people having a chat over here, and another group having a chat over there, and nobody going, are they okay? That's what we do. It's horrifying. That's what we do. And we do it for many reasons. What?
That's a big city.
Yeah.
There's so many people and so many instances of people doing strange things that you sort of go, okay.
Yeah.
In smaller communities, people respond.
No, it is a different thing in smaller communities, yeah. And also in the north of England, I mean, there's that standard YouTube thing, isn't there, of the news report of the man from the north of England traumatizing southerners by saying hello to them. And they interview various victims of this man who eventually has to issue an apology and leave. Yes, we were joking when we were up listening to... No, it was a joke, but it's a standard thing that in London you tend not to say hello to strangers, whereas in the north of England you definitely do say hello. And I mean, when we were up listening to Dougie Rimshire in Bellingham, after about 2 days, I was joking with friends going, well, we're becoming a bit northern, aren't we? Because you go down the street, morning, how are you? You know, whereas in London you'd never do that. You'd look at the ground and carry on, you know. Okay. So, that's it. Game over. We've finished the first chapter, a brief look, and this is the chapter of I prostrate to the body of she in whom the sacred precious mind is born. I seek refuge in that source of happiness who brings to happiness even those who harm her. That's the first thing. It's prostration or namaskara, this to show it's not just respect, it's admiration, you know. There's a whole thing going on there. But that final verse, if you do anything tonight, please just think a little bit about Bodhicitta before you go to sleep. Whatever you use, you know, we all have text at home, but whatever you use, just think about something about that, because there's nothing better we can do with our minds, actually, than think about that. Okay, thank you so much. Night-night.